Hey everybody, welcome back to another Inside the Music regarding the music of Anchored specifically. And this is going to be the Overture. This is the very, very first track on the album. And it's one that really sets the scene. It's really one that sets the stage for the whole album, even referencing music that came before from previous releases, as well as sort of foreshadowing a very prominent motive, two very prominent motives throughout this album. Very much like what you'd find in an overture for like, a musical or an opera. Some reviews for Anchored have called this like a rock opera, and it makes sense. So let's take a deep dive. I'm going to play a few things and let's break it down. So the very first thing that I wanted to have happen was this, literally the main motive that you'll hear throughout this album, which is from In Good and Bad Times, from my first album, Rosewater. I talk about that more in my Love and Be Merciful video, but here it is. And so I really wanted this to feel almost like a trailer, right? So you have that happen, and then we actually get the vows from our wedding, from the actual wedding, because that's what this album is about. It's about marriage.
Anthony and Maria, have you come here freely and without reservation to give yourselves to each other in marriage?
Yes.
Will you love and honor each other as man and wife for the rest of your lives?
Yes.
Will you accept children lovingly from God and bring them up according to the law of Christ and his church?
Yes.
Right, so it's almost like, film scoring. There's a bit of just kind of underscore underneath this narration. And the reason it's not really dark, it's mysterious, is because if you've listened to this album already, there's a very, very clear indication that things weren't going very well for a bit, and it's actually through faith and through prayer that we found that redemption. This is sort of foreshadowing that, okay, yes, these vows are being said, but it's not going to look pretty at some point in their future. And then we actually get a taste of our first taste of Venerable Fulton Sheen, who is very much the narration throughout this album, taken from his talks, through his public domain talks, and he has such a way with words that I found them to be extremely relevant, not only to the marriage situation we were in a few years back, but just spirituality as a whole. I feel like while his talks were from the 50s and 60s, they feel so relevant today.
If any man has a mind to come my way, let him renounce himself, take up his cross, and follow me.
So a couple things here. Number one, he mentions the cross, right? I think a lot of times people think marriage is just going to be this happy, just roses and butterflies all the time. But for those of you who've been married, you know that that's not always the case, whether it's through finances, children, you name it. There's going to be stuff that happens, right? And so there are times where marriage really feels like a cross, and it's our job to carry it, which is why I love, he's basically quoting Jesus. If any man has a mind to come my way, Jesus, let him renounce himself, take up his cross, and follow me, right? So to take up the cross and to bear that, not necessarily that burden, but to bear that responsibility. There are these hits that you probably heard at this big swell, right? Forgot to enable the timpani here. So there's two more. This idea being, Fulton Sheen mentions the cross. Christ mentions, you got to carry your cross. So this idea was, if you got the four limbs of Christ, 2 hands, 2 feet, my idea with this was almost like, nailing Jesus to the cross, right? Or frankly, like nailing myself to the cross. Or if you get married, nailing yourself to the cross. Like the idea of you're going to carry it, and you got to carry it. More of a subtle thing. I don't know if people would just kind of assume that automatically when they hear this, but that was my intention when I was kind of cultivating this. There's this roll of the piano. Let me solo that. right? So this piano roll is extremely important. This roll, this descent, and you have the whole orchestra doing it basically. Let me mute Fulton Sheen. Just listen again. Right, so even mixed with that timpani roll, there's this descending figure, this rolling downward. And I set this up, I was thinking about this in two ways. The first of which is like, you can fall into two different categories. You can fall into hell, so to speak. You can fall into despair. And you can also fall into love. You can also fall into another warmer, softer direction. Right? So the idea of falling into something is, it could go either way. And I think that applies to a lot of things in life. There are a lot of beautiful things in life that can be corrupted. There are a lot of beautiful things in life that can be turned in upon itself rather than turning outward and open. Right? So the idea of falling into madness or falling into hell or falling into anger and hatred and all those negative things, right? That happened to me. But then through faith, I was able to now fall into God's embrace, fall into the embrace of Christ. And so this descending piano figure comes through literally the entire album. So let me show you a few examples here. The first of which happens in Disruption, the second track that we hear. It's very subtle in this one. It's almost like a taste of this piano descent. It's almost like a taste of this, like I'm falling, but not quite there yet. I haven't fallen completely down into pure destruction, but it's like I'm getting there. So let's take a listen. Right? There's a little figure right in the middle of that, and it's extremely subtle. It's not quite a full-blown descent, but just a taste of that piano descent. Then right as we get to the penultimate track of the first half, Satan's Game, there is a much clearer like reference to that very beginning piano roll we heard in the beginning of the overture. What have I become? What have I become? What have I become? You know, Satan's Game is very much like I have fallen into complete, just like, what have I done to myself? What have I done to this marriage? What have I done, essentially? The second half is about redemption, right? People have even asked me, why did you include all this darker stuff? It's because it's to show that even when things got to be extremely bad, we were still able to find our way out, through the grace of God. And Love and Be Merciful, which kicks off the second half of the album, very much has that rolling piano figure. This time it's about holiness, falling into, turning around, falling into God's grace rather than the enemy.
Remember that no human being in the world is love. God alone is love.
And if you can hear, it's not even it's not like it even descends down and stays down. It goes down and it comes back up. It's almost like this Love and Be Merciful piano roll is almost like God kind of trying, like, okay, you're down there, but let me pull you back out. Let me get you out of the depths. So it's like a piano roll and ascent at the same time. Then we get to Anchored, the title track, which is very much this moment of like a miracle just happened. My entire persona and my entire being has been flipped upside down in the best way possible. A piano roll, but it's not quite as dark and grim, and it doesn't stay down in the depths, but it rather feels almost angelic. Very similar to that Love and Be Merciful one, right? Where it's like it rolls, but then it comes back out. It rolls down. And so it's almost like we're falling into we're like falling upward, if that makes sense. And then lastly, at the end of Honey, I'm Home, it's this piano roll figure, but it's, again, extremely soft and warm.
There will be in heaven a limitless receptivity and a boundless gift. This is what you marry for love. And love leads you to God. Godly.
Like we've fallen into a new life. We've fallen into, frankly, like a rebirth. We've fallen into a new marriage, so to speak. Like it was that much of a change. You know, it's been so many years later now, and we've never been better, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful time since then. And it really just sort of proves the power of God's hand when you sort of surrender your life to him, right? Because it was that selfishness kind of preventing this falling into his love. And then there is this. I'm going to mute the narration real quick, but this is the Lost at Sea main theme, or the Lost at Sea melody. So it's that lost at sea, wishing you could be, right? I even have a little audio clip for you. We can listen to it. Lost at sea, wishing you could be. So when I was making this album, it really felt like the closure of everything that came before. So we had Rosewater and Lost at Sea, which were two releases very much about suffering, but also hope. You know, I'm always very adamant about, if I'm going to be making music about suffering, I want to make sure that there's some element of hope that, you know, is at the end of it or somewhere within it. And so Lost at Sea was very much about grief and suffering, but also hope in God's mercy, hope in God's grace. The idea being that Anchored really was the tail end of this long period of suffering from health and grief, and then, you know, my own mistakes and, you know, marital suffering. But at the end of the day, the message overall, it's like, it's very much, this life is about love. You know, marriage is about love. It's about surrender to God, right? No matter what's going on, whether you lost someone, whether you're sick and unwell, or whether you're having difficulties in your marriage, surrendering it all to God and allowing him to kind of take control. That is the ultimate message. I hope this gives you some interesting insight to the Overture. It really gives you a taste of what's to come with the whole album. So check it out. It's in the description below if you want to hear this whole track. It's also part of the trailer for Anchored. And stay tuned for more of these. Thank you again for watching, and may God bless you on your journey.